to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. We're in the middle of a series on the book of Acts, and we're taking a break this week for a special episode. Those that attend our church or are familiar with the Federated Church know that one of our longtime core values is global missions. And we just had our missions weekend this past weekend, and so I want to have an episode today that we're going to have a missionary spotlight, and hopefully this will be something that we do in the future, and just have an opportunity to get to know one of our missionaries a little better, and not so much get to know them better as much as get to know their country that they're serving and get to know the ministry that they're serving in a little bit better. Now, this one is starting off with someone who is very familiar with us and grew up in the Federated Church and has been on the podcast multiple times already. But Morgan Ring is home, and so how are you doing today? You've been home for what? A week?
Yeah, about a week and a half. Yep.
Okay. So coming from Honduras, different weather. When you got home, it was probably warm because we were still having...
it was still good.
Yeah, unseasonably warm temperatures. Not so much now. Today, I think it finally hit 40. It does look like the sun is out. But this morning, as I was helping pack some stuff up, some equipment for our leaf removal for the Dominican team with Travis Pratt at like 6 o'clock, it was not warm in the slightest, and there was no sun out, and it was, but it was dry at least, so it wasn't raining. So you happen to be home at this point. How long are you home for? And we know that maybe not the main purpose that you're supposed to say, but one of the main purposes is to come see your niece.
Of course.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a huge deal for you to get home and see her. But how long are you home for, and what's the purpose of being home?
Yeah, so I'm home through Christmas, which is a long time.
Yeah.
I probably would not have selected this long of a time just because transitions are hard for me.
Yeah.
But it just made sense with Everly being born and then coming to the end of my 2-year commitment. And so transitioning from that 2-year commitment into an indefinite commitment, letting people know that, doing some more support raising so that I can continue to be on the field long term. So yeah, that's why it worked out to be here this long. And plane tickets are expensive to go back and forth.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's not like a come and go and
right.
travel. Your budget is not, you're on a missionary's budget. And so that is something you want to be a good steward of the money that you raise and people support you with. But at the same time, getting home for a variety of reasons. You had a wedding you were in also, correct?
So that's why I came home when I did mid-October, so I could be there for the wedding that weekend. And
so it's I'm sure it's been a whirlwind to get home and to get acclimated, because your last year there, you were in your own apartment.
Yeah,
so
last year and a half.
Yeah, so it became much more of a home. And like that pretty soon might be referred to. I mean, this is always going to be home, but becoming more of like, oh, I'm leaving home to go visit my family, you know. And
I've struggled with the word home because I feel like I've always put so much pressure on it. Like when I call it home, it's going to feel like home. And that's not fair, because wherever I'm at is home. Yeah. But I think that this will always be home. Yeah. There will always be, for the time being, there will always be home. Yeah. So I
was just saying, and that's, that's always part of it. And like you said, transitions are not necessarily your favorite thing. Now, have you always been like that? Like,
I don't know. I think one of the things for me is I'm really good at getting to a place and just like diving all in. So it's almost like when I'm here, I'm not thinking about there. When I'm there, I'm not not that I'm not thinking about it, not that I don't miss it, but it's just like easy to make my life there. Yeah. So I think that's always been something that's been easy for me, like even short-term trips and things like that. It's like, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I'm focused. So then it's hard to switch that. And so the initial transition, I think, can be challenging.
One of the beauties of that, like I've been challenged with this over the last few years of my life because sometimes I lose track and I'm not present in the moment, and I'm looking to whatever is to come. And it's something my counselor's been working with me on, of being like, hey, you need to be present. Don't be in such a rush to get to whatever's next, and be present. So that's a good thing. That might be why transitions aren't always your favorite is because you're able to be present in the moment and, really dive in. And so that's great. So you mentioned this already, and you've come to the end of your first 2 years. And so you're transitioning, and we'll talk about that transition from you knew you signed up for 2 years, and now it's not like you've signed your life away, that you're there the rest of it, but it's an indefinite commitment. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But in these first 2 years of, I guess, a temporary assignment, even though pretty permanent, for those 2 years, what was the biggest unexpected surprise for you? Because how many times had you been to Honduras?
There's sometimes a trip that I forget about.
Yeah, I know. So
I'm counting and I'm like, wait, I think it was about 5 times beforehand.
Okay. But I mean,
6.
yeah, and your father's a board member for Nueva, and like your family is heavily invested. You've been multiple times. So it wasn't like you were going to an unknown.
Right.
But as you went down there for more than just 10 days or a week, what was one of the biggest unexpected surprises for you so far?
I think, kind of like you said, being so familiar with the ministry, I almost struggled with saying yes in the beginning because I felt like it was going to be too easy. Like, I can't go to Honduras because Honduras is like home, like I know the ministry, I know. Yeah. So it's going to be too easy, and that's not really what I should do, and I think that was kind of my mindset going into it. And then I think I got there and realized how challenging it was going to be.
Yeah.
And like, even just thinking like what Barbara did 30 years ago, going down without knowing Spanish or anybody, I'm like, I don't think I could do it. Or, listening to Bob Fleming and what he's doing in India, like, could I do that without the support? So anyways, I do think though that I think every person has challenges. And so even every missionary assignment is going to have challenges. The challenges are going to look different. So I know for me, like when we first got there, the very first day, we had been traveling all day. Not all day. It's like a 12-hour travel day.
Okay, but still. Yeah,
it was an early morning. And we got back to the team house, and Barbara goes, okay, we need to go grocery shopping. I said, what? Wait, I have to make food? And so I think that was the biggest thing, transitioning to living on my own. I feel like I've always been more independent, but when I was in college, I made food college food, and I had a meal plan, so I didn't really have to worry about it. So that first grocery shopping experience, I cried on the way back, and I got home and I called my parents and I was like, I have pasta, but I don't have anything to put on it. I got stuff for tacos, but I only have lettuce. So just all those things that I wasn't expecting how much I had to do, I guess. In my mind, it was just transitioning to a new job. But I was transitioning to a new culture, to a new way of life, living on my own. And so I think that initial just figuring out that it was going to be a lot harder than I originally, I guess, thought it would be.
Yeah, and the other thing that you were familiar with was going down and being part of a team. And team life is distinctly different because as a team, you go down and there's food fixed for you.
And I think that's the one thing that I said to my mom. I was like, I've done a lot of living in different situations, but it's always been community living.
Yeah.
Going to the ranch, going on different mission trips, being in college. So it was like, oh, it's not a big deal for me to be somewhere that's not home. Not realizing that even though it was different people every time, it was always people that I was with.
Yeah.
So going to that, it's me.
Yeah. And it's funny because Katie has said, so when she went down to Mexico, her greatest, after doing medical missions for 20 years now or whatever, her greatest source of anxiety going down was the first grocery store trip, because she's like, and she was like not having a panic attack, but like she was getting very worked up here days before because she's like, I need to make sure I get everything. I can't, and with her situation, I'm sure there's a little bit of yours also. It's not like for my wife and I, oh, we forgot something. Wegmans is 4 minutes down the road and we can just go whenever. And she's like, no, I need to be able to have everything I need for the first couple of weeks because we don't go very often, and all that pressure. And then because she mentioned basically what you were saying, like, I know I'm going to get home and I'm going to have like this, but not this, and this, but not this. And,
I've gotten really good at making lists.
Yeah,
grocery
yes,
lists.
yes. And now you understand why your mother had a list when you went to the grocery store with her and checked everything off. But yeah, there's like those little things that you just don't think of, Now that's something that was unexpected and just an adjustment. But as you've served those 2 years, what might have been like a real source of frustration or even discouragement? Because the other thing is like you said, like you're involved with people a lot, and that's how you've always gone. But also like there's I know I've talked to a lot of missionaries. There's a loneliness that can set in like really quick. That you don't expect. But so what for you in these 2 years, what has been a source of frustration and discouragement?
I think especially the first year, less so the second year, but it was connecting with others because my personality, and I think it's come out even more now that I live alone.
Yeah.
And I live up the mountain, not close to everybody else. I don't like going down into the city during the week.
Yeah.
It's really easy for me to isolate, especially when we don't have teams. So it's like, okay, I go to work 9 to 5. Now I'm going back to my house and it's dark,
Yeah.
I'm not in the city. It's not easy to go see anybody. I'm staying where I'm at. And so I think especially with the language challenge, like I don't like going somewhere that I haven't been before. So like I don't like going to a different restaurant because I don't know, the menu, or even as my Spanish is improving, I still am nervous about things like that. The parking situations, like just all the things that I don't know what the traffic is, or the road's going to be okay. So many things like that it's really easy for me to just go back to my house. Yeah. And I think at the ministry as well, like there's been opportunities that I haven't taken because like I don't speak Spanish, and it is a different level, like where I'm at versus where our employees are. One thing in Honduras, culturally, you party for everything. So every time there's a birthday, there's a big party, there's cake. Yeah. And so for just about all of them, I'm sitting in my office and I hear everybody singing and, having a great time. And there's parts of me that's like, I wish they would have invited me. Like, I wish I could be down there with them. But at the same time, I feel like when I know a birthday is coming up, I get so nervous because I'm like, what if they ask me to go down? Like, and they play games and like all these things.
And I can't communicate. And,
right. And so I think that was, I'm an introvert and I know that. And so I think my personality hasn't helped me in that way. I think that's been the hardest. Yeah, I think that just trying to figure out how to connect and how to get over myself in a lot of ways and go out and do things.
I'm pausing because I did not realize you were an introvert. Like that's not your personality. You like convey.
That's
like
great.
Because like I guess, and this is not to have too many blanket generalizations, but you're very good in front of people. And so that doesn't mean that. Because I have some really close pastor friends that are tremendously gifted in communication and preaching, and they would much rather not talk to anyone. And so I know that can be the case.
I like to listen. Like I would much rather just be a part of something, but just sit there and not have to carry a conversation. Like just listen to what's going on. As I'm more comfortable with people, I feel like then my more extroverted side will come out. Yeah. Or just even with kids and things like that. But just, I don't know.
No, and that's not a bad thing, but it's interesting because I would have not thought that was a discouragement or frustration because I didn't think that was part of your personality. So
well, I
thought you were going to say like the isolation was such a frustration because you're such a people person, but like it's the other way around.
Yeah, I was telling Tasha because Tasha knows me and Tasha and I are comfortable together, good friends. And I think one thing that I've kind of figured out about myself is I'm definitely a people pleaser. So like if you ask me to do something, I'm not going to say no. I'm going to do it. Even if I'm stressed out and anxious beforehand, I'm going to be there. So a lot of opportunities where people are like, oh, we should do this. Why don't you plan something? It's going to get canceled. I'm just never going to plan it.
Yeah.
But if you say, hey, I'm doing this, be here at this time, I will be there.
Yeah.
So I think just trying to figure out, like knowing that about myself and saying, you need to tell me where I need to be and when, or I will not come.
Yeah.
It will never get planned.
It just won't happen. Oh man, and I got to believe that as you might have multiple nights, because as an introvert, there's times you will need to be by yourself to recharge. That'll help recharge your battery. But after doing that too many consecutive nights, like you said, going up the mountain and everybody else goes down, like that's got to affect just how you even walk into work.
Yeah.
And all that. So, that would definitely be something it's good that you're aware of though, and that you need to continue to work on. So speaking of language, have you done any official training? Is it just, how's that going?
Yeah. So when I first got down there, the first thing I did was start online classes through a local, it's called the Spanish Institute of Honduras, and it's a missionary couple that started it. Yeah. And it's about 2 hours away. So I was doing online classes through them. All of their teachers only speak Spanish, and so it's a very immersive experience. So I was taking those online classes, and then last year, actually around this time, it was the beginning of November, middle of November, I went to the school for 2 weeks and I lived in a Honduran home. Okay. And so like I actually got to live with two of the girls that are teachers. They're in their mid to early 20s. Yeah. And so it was their family. So it was the mom and then their 3 girls. Nice. And so it felt at home. They don't speak English either though. So again, even at the house, my introvert side came out and I was in my room a lot. Yeah. But I got a lot of opportunities to improve my Spanish during that week, 2 weeks, but also just learn more about the culture because, again, living on my own, I cook American food, I don't
cook what you know.
Right. So even those 2 weeks helped me to learn a lot about the culture and just sitting around and talking with them and things like that. Yeah,
and that had to be good. So obviously there's been some amazing parts of the first 2 years. I was going to say otherwise you wouldn't have signed up indefinitely. But if God called you, even if it was all just frustration, you still would have signed up, to answer God's call. But so what has been some of the best parts, and maybe one that you expected, but maybe even one that has been unexpected. But the things that you're like, this is why now I see why God called me to this.
Mm-hmm. I think something unexpected, which I don't even know if maybe other people expected it, I guess, but just the opportunities that I've had to work with our youth. I mean, the initial job description that Barbara wrote up for me included working with the youth. Yeah. I did not do that because youth are really hard, especially when you don't speak their language. Like, I feel like for the kids, it was easy for me just to go and sit in a classroom and not understand what's going on because the kids just love to have you there. Yeah. Youth, it's a little bit harder. Like, if I show up, why are you here? They're not necessarily trying to include me in conversations as much, which makes me sad even with our teams because I'm like, these youth are so great. Like, just try and communicate with them. Yeah. So I think just the way that I've been able to be involved in our youth ministry was not what was expected going into it. And it's just been in the last few months, but it's been very natural, I guess. It just made sense with how things were moving that I kind of jumped in here and got involved here. And just, being able to connect a little bit more with our youth and just get to know them better. And be more involved in that aspect of the ministry. Yeah. And so, because
Nueva, they have grown in what they do basically as the orphans that they served got older and stuck around. They continued to provide things. And now even to the grand vision of this training center that will be revolutionary. You know,
right.
like,
and our kids aren't orphans, so they do have families.
So they do have okay.
And so that's
are
the
any
whole
of them
thing.
orphans? No. Okay.
That's the whole thing with the ministry, is the fact that they can still go home to their families. And sometimes, you know, it goes back and forth. There are some kids that I'm like, these parents are not taking care of their kids the way they should be.
Yeah.
And there's some situations that are just so hard because we just want to pull them out of those situations. But there are other families, and I think the majority of our parents, that love their kids so much. Like last year, I took 2 girls home with me because they were sick. It was a Friday. Their mom had to work, all weekend, so they were going to be home alone.
Yeah.
So I took them home, and when we asked mom if that was okay, she wanted to come in and meet me. She wanted to, have a conversation with them, and she loved them so much. And so in that situation, it's like, these aren't the kids that we want to take away from their families. These are the ones that should be with their parents because they love them and they want to care for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, I don't know why I thought there was an element of orphans, but it is something that the ministry has expanded as the kids have gotten older and stuck around and continue to be like, okay, what's next?
Right.
And so it's neat that with how much you've had involvement here over the years with youth. Well, for the majority of it, you were youth. No,
right. But that's kind of why I feel like it was almost expected, because I did work so much with our youth here, and I love to come back. And, I came back early last year so I could go to the castle with the youth and things like that. So I kind of felt like it made sense, but at the same time, it's not. I don't go looking for the youth.
Yes. Not many people do. No, we're Steve to get the amen. And so that is neat. I'm excited because you even shared about that some during the mission weekend about your involvement with the youth and just the joy that it's brought. I'm eager to see what that develops into moving forward and how that role changes. And so you went down, you knew that you signed up for 2 years. And I'm sure at some level there was like, God, is this more than 2 years? Like there was at least that thought process going through your mind before you went down initially. But take us through, what does it look like to have that process of, God, is this where you want me moving forward? And to have a mentality shift. How much, and I know you haven't gone back down yet, but how much different, if any, is your mindset from going down initially for 2-year commitment compared to, oh, this is different this time? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. I kind of struggle with the whole, I don't know if calling's the right word. Yeah. But because even the initial one, like I said, I struggled to say yes. And I think a lot of that was because I never felt like a clear, like, God's voice saying, you're going to Honduras.
Yes. Yeah.
It just made sense. Mm-hmm. And God opened all those doors. And so I feel like it's kind of similar with this commitment going forward. Like, there was never a point that I was like, yeah, I'm going to stay. Like, I couldn't tell you when it was, like, because even when I was here last Christmas, again, going back to I get really comfortable and can see myself, like, I knew that we were going to have an opening for a preschool teacher. I was like, forget Honduras. I'll just stay here and be a preschool teacher.
Yeah, I'll do this.
And so just those kinds of things. And my transition back in January was the hardest one yet. Like, it was so hard. And that was the one that I expected to be the best, because I had an apartment. I had a cat. I had a little bit more stability, and it was so hard.
Was it hard from leaving and then getting reacclimated, or?
It was just, everything was hard. The first week, something went wrong every day. Like, my cat broke my coffee maker, and then my computer got something in it and stopped charging, and then my car broke down, and it was just like a week of crying, 2 weeks of crying. Like, it was just like nothing went right, and it just didn't make sense to me. Like,
and the reality that, and not that you're not independent, but the reality that your parents aren't there, like, your safety net's not there, meaning like your friends and stuff, like it, like that.
Yeah. So I think I don't know what it'll be like going back, to be honest, to see what my mindset
What's
will
gonna
be.
break?
Right. How am I going to feel?
like-
Because there's potential for a lot of change right away when I get back.
Yeah.
And we're, diving in pretty quickly to a busy year, which can be good and bad. For me personally, just sometimes being busy, it's better for me to not just be sitting at home and thinking about how I went from being with my family to being alone. So I don't know. I think I have a lot more to go back to at the ministry this time.
Okay.
Where even before I had my apartment, I had those connections, but I didn't have things that I was doing, I guess I felt more replaceable, if that makes sense. Like nothing that I was doing was unique to me. There was no reason that I needed to be the one doing them. And I think going even now, I think that if I couldn't go back, hopefully the things would continue.
Yeah.
And somebody else could take them, but they're things that have been more of my heart projects, I guess. And there's a lot more of the kids that I think recognize that I was leaving, especially the youth. One of the girls was like, forget your family. We're your family. Stay here. I'm sorry, Linda. I have to go.
I love you, but I haven't met my niece. I haven't,
Yeah. So I think just having those connections, and I think for, again, another thing for me has always been putting pressure on time. From the beginning, I didn't like the fact that I had to make a 2-year commitment. I wanted to make a long-term commitment or nothing.
Yeah.
And so not knowing what the future holds, I guess, is something that I struggle with. But yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but
No, yeah, it does. Because I think it also answered a little bit of what I wanted to know, your different excitement and fears this time compared to maybe when you went back before or when you went initially. And like you said, there's some unknown, but you were more established. And teenagers are weird. They were crying when you left, and they might hold you at arm's length when you go back.
Right.
You might have to earn your way back into their,
yeah.
And it's, and I shouldn't just throw teenagers under the bus, because we as humans are like that, know. But it might not be that seamless, going back and everything's fine. It was interesting because this time when you were, I think it was during the mission luncheon that you shared something to the effect of, it's been an adjustment because, some of my projects aren't going forward like I think they should, or you mentioned something about if I was there, it'd be more efficient and more would be getting done, and so that I took that as a positive of, not that you didn't have ownership before, but there was a little bit more of a sense of purpose. And I think there's a beauty, because we don't want to make it that everything we do depends on us. And if we all of a sudden aren't there, it's all going to implode. But there's also something to be said for bringing a uniqueness to the team of this is what I bring and this is what I, and still be training someone else up to help. But I think that's a vital thing for ownership. And so it's neat to hear that's something that you're feeling more of. And so how much of that, as your home, how much of that are you still, because it's not like you're checking out of Nueva for the next 2 months. The beauty of modern day technology, you can be interacting with them daily. So what on a daily basis, how much are you checking in? Is it just checking emails? Is it communicating via video with them at times?
Yeah, there's no video communication.
Okay.
Because of what I'm doing. So I have my Honduran phone with me. And so it's kind of this weird, this is a slower time for me anyways.
Okay.
Because I just don't have a lot to do, project wise. We don't have teams coming, so I'm not really communicating with them. I'm getting them on the calendar, but I'm not directly doing their schedules and things like that yet. I already finished our calendar for the next year. There's not any newsletters to write. So there's just not as many projects right now. So at the ministry, it would be a lot more where I would go down and hang out in a classroom or, you know, take more pictures. As things come up, of course, there's things to do, but it's not like I have like a long to-do list. I almost feel like I just more need to be, it's almost like I'm on call. Like at all times.
No. And then, but the relationship building is huge, you know, and pouring into the students.
Yeah. And so, yeah, like I said, with the project, or like you mentioned, some of the projects that I'm working on, and kind of as there's been some issues, some hiccups, like getting messages like, okay, this is what's going on. What do you want us to do? And it's like, I don't know. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing, just trying to be here as a support for them. Because again, and why the ministry is successful is because it's not Americans doing everything. It's training Hondurans and Honduran teachers to do them because they understand our students, they understand the culture.
Yeah.
So eventually that would be the hope, even with these things, that, they might ask my opinion on things, but they need to be like, I want to train them to be able to do it. So I guess just in that way, providing support as much as I can, and understanding that it's the first year of these things, the first couple months, and we're coming to the end of the school year. So there's a lot of challenges with it just to begin with. But just, being available to offer support as much as I can.
Okay. So give us a snapshot. One of the things like when that I hope to do when we have these missionary spotlights is for you to give a snapshot of the city, the town, the village, you know, whoever it is, where they live. So it doesn't need to be a huge explanation, but give us a snapshot of Tegucigalpa, and if I even pronounced it right, I mispronounce things on a regular basis, you know. So give us a snapshot.
So I live in the capital city of Honduras, which is Tegucigalpa. It's a city of 2 million people, and Tegucigalpa is kind of in like a bowl, so it's surrounded by mountains, and the city is down in the valley. So I live up in the mountains. I live outside of the city. It's a 15-20 minute drive to work, which is on the outskirts of one of the sides. So the ministry is in El Reparto, which is a more dangerous area of the city. Like if you get in a taxi and say, "Oh, I'm going to El Reparto," they're like, "Are you sure?"
Like that.
So
you're not from here,
right? So where I'm, this like little area that I live in is right up the mountain from that.
Okay.
So it's Tegucigalpa is such an interesting city because since it's a capital city, you've got like the richest of the rich there. You know, you've got all the embassy workers are there, all the U.S. embassy workers, the government is there. And so you've got all of these rich people, but then you've also got extreme poverty in the communities like where we work. So it's just kind of interesting when you drive through the city because you're looking at all this development. Like there are so many malls, you're seeing all of like these fast food restaurants that you're familiar with. And then you kind of get into our city and, you know, there's a McDonald's 5 minutes away. Most of our kids have never been to McDonald's. So just the difference in how crazy things are, and just knowing that all of these things that are right around our kids that they have never experienced because they can't, you know, they don't have transportation. They don't have money to do those things. But yeah, it's a beautiful city. And I think like, again, living up the mountain, just driving by, like, especially at night, seeing all the lights down the mountain, and seeing from my house, I have a view of the opposite side of the city. And there's so much beauty, and it's hard to think of that beauty is also so much poverty. So yeah, it's a gorgeous place, but it's also a broken and sad place.
And it's interesting because my experience with overseas missions is in Santo Domingo area in the Dominican, and it's so similar in the sense of you go there's resorts, there's like, it's on the ocean, it's beautiful, there's all these first world things, and then you take a couple turns and it's like you said, extreme poverty. And we went to an orphanage last year, and we're going to go again to this orphanage. And we wanted to provide dinner and some supplies. And I'm blanking on I think it was the German Christian who literally would just pray for hours on end, and like it was, he didn't know where his provisions for his orphanage would come from more than a meal in advance sometimes, and this orphanage operates somewhat like that, and they have, I think, upwards of 80 kids now. But when I wanted to provide, as a team, we wanted to provide something special for a dinner, and then we brought cake because they don't celebrate birthdays and all that stuff. And all that to say, it made me think of it because the McDonald's thing, they opened a new chicken place near them. It was Pollo something, it was like a Kentucky Fried Chicken. And so Nelson's like, oh, we should get this. I was like, okay, I guess. Like, if the kids will like it. I mean, I love fried chicken, but, it was like Christmas because they had always seen the signs and they had never been. And it was just this like, really like take a step back of like, oh, yeah. Like, something that they probably would love to try, but there's never that's not gonna happen. Like you said, like they've 5 minutes from McDonald's, but never been able to experience it. And so there's the beauty of the city. But so this might be fishing too much, and it might not be the same, but I'm probably pretty confident. What's so beautiful, though, about all of the people that you experience that are in poverty? So often we get the blinders on, the American blinders of like, oh, they're so poor, their life must be just awful. But what beauty have you experienced with them? Excuse me.
There are definitely things, and they're generalizations, just obviously, because this isn't the case, obviously, for all of our kids. Yes. But oftentimes, even though they have so little, they're so willing to give. Yeah. And again, that's not always the case.
No.
And sometimes I struggle when teams are like, oh, they're so joyful, they're so willing to give. And it's like, oh, you don't see them on a daily basis. Because they're still people, they're still sinful people.
There always are.
But yeah, they're just so willing to share and to give what they have to others. And I think that's something that our team members recognize, and it is the truth. But oftentimes, like we tell team members when we go on field trips and things like that, we're going to give the kids lunch. They might not eat it all. Don't make them eat it all, because they're probably taking it home to their families.
Yes.
And so again, just things like that where it would
provide a way they can keep it. That's
right. Yeah. It would be so easy for them to just eat it all and want more, and they're probably still hungry, and they some of the kids may eat it all, but oftentimes they'll say, oh, I'm gonna share this, I'm gonna take this back and share it with my mom or share it with my grandma.
And that's it's a humbling generosity that they have. And I know that it's something that I've experienced as well. And it's a great reminder.
Yeah. And I think of one of our youth specifically that is always so joyful. And knowing the situation that he comes from, like we delivered a bunk bed to his house last year.
Yeah.
And we put the bunk bed in their little room. It's him and his two younger brothers. The younger brothers get on the bottom bunk. He jumps on the top bunk, and the bunk bed goes to the floor. Oh. I'm standing there because the room's so small, so I'm the only one like in there, and I'm standing there, and I look at Carlos. I'm like, Carlos, the floor just gave way. And so, but the whole time he's like, oh, we got boards in the back. We just got to go fix it, And they go back and grab a board, and they hammer it in place. But at the ministry, his attitude, and again, he's a youth, and it's not all of the youth, but he is so willing to do whatever you ask him with a smile on his face. Yeah. And just the fact that he's so joyful knowing the situation that he comes from and knowing the things that he's been through.
Yeah. And it's a reminder that all of us, our joy should come from the Lord, and to be reminded of that when we see someone that we think doesn't have enough reason to be joyful because of their outside circumstances. Right. But their joy does come from the Lord. And then that way, the other stuff, it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean that it's not painful. It doesn't mean any of that. But their true joy is rooted in Christ. And it's such a great reminder. Now, one of the things I also wanted to talk about, and this is a unique situation from some of our other missionaries because of how much involvement it has here in the United States. But one of the things that is, been a hot topic for quite a while is the southern border of the United States. We're not going to get into any political things of how much we should shut down or should we just have a free-for-all and let everyone in. But one of the things that Carlos shared when he was here last time is the fact that, I just saw, like, once again, September was a record number of legal and illegal individuals crossing. But what is on the extreme rise are the number of Venezuelan and Honduran individuals. This is not just people coming from Mexico. There's a lot of others that are making this long trip up. Speak to, now that you have a different perspective, not just what it's doing in the United States of having them come in that regard, but speak to what does that look like in Honduras? How are you seeing and experiencing that? Is it families going? Is it individuals? Is it, what does that look like? Because I know Carlos was extremely passionate about that.
Yeah, and when Carlos was here, he mentioned the book Enrique's Journey as well.
Oh, yeah.
Which was one that Barbara brought back and asked all of us to read, and I did read it. I did not like the writing style.
Okay.
But the topic of it is what kept me going. And it's written, it's an older book, so it's based on when they used to make the journey was more dangerous because they did it on top of rail cars and things like that through Mexico. But kind of towards the end, the whole point is a mother went because she thought she couldn't provide for her family. And so this boy grew up always wanting his mother. So eventually he made the decision to go as well, to follow his mother essentially. Yeah. But in doing so, he also left behind a girlfriend and a child. Yeah. And so just this continual process of dividing families. And it's written by a journalist, so she doesn't give you a direct, here's my thought on it. Yeah. But at the end, she kind of hints that it's destroying families, and it is. And so I think that's what's the hardest thing is, but there's so many other factors in it, and that's what's so complicated because it's not a black and white issue.
No, it's not.
And we see our families being pulled apart constantly. One of the little boys that, he's 10 now. Well, but it's one of the boys that my sister sponsors and has been sponsoring since he was 3. He was one of the unique ones where he had both parents at home and, he had a complete family. Yeah. And then a couple years ago, Dad decided to go to the States with his little sister because he figured it would be easier to get to the States with a little girl than by himself. And they made it and they haven't been back since. Mom tried to go once as well, leaving the boys with grandparents. And going from a complete family to only one parent and losing your sibling.
A sibling going, yeah.
Because the reality when they leave, especially in that way, is you're not going to see them again. Yeah. There is no way for them to come back knowing that they're going to be able to go back. And so it's that decision of saying goodbye, and it's pulling our families apart because then you come, and so the reason that our families leave, there's many reasons. For some of them, it's because there's no opportunities. Yeah. They can't find a job to make money. So they feel like they have to go provide for their family. Other times it's gang violence. Like we had one family who, decided to leave because they had issues with the gangs and they were getting in trouble. So like to the point, sometimes it's a family member that was involved in the gangs, and then it's like they tried to leave or other things, and so you have to leave or you're going to die. Yeah. And so for so many, it seems like it's a life and death situation. Like, do I stay here and my family starves? Do I stay here and my family's killed by the gangs, or do I leave? Yeah. And so again, knowing that there's so many different factors that go into it, but then seeing the families ripped apart, because again, Honduras is such a community driven culture as well. So like families live together, multiple generations live together. So you're leaving someone behind. And so seeing these families pulled apart, is it worth it? And that's the question that it comes down to. Like, and again, it's hard because, yeah, you might be struggling in the food or money department, but you're together and you're a family.
Yeah. And I am very, very blessed that I've never even had to entertain that thought. I know how blessed I am that my wife and I can provide for our kids. I don't know that separation would be the answer, but again, I've never been put in that, so I can't. I sure can't throw stones when I've never experienced it.
And there's so many different situations. Like just a couple recently, we had one family that the mom just couldn't find work, so they decided as a family to leave. And you always face the risk of deportation. And I don't remember where they went because a lot of our families go to Spain as well because, again, it's more expensive usually to get there. But it's a Latin America, like, you know, it's not Latin America, but it's a Spanish culture, you know.
Yes.
It's a little bit easier. And so there are lots of places, but anyways, they were going to Mexico and they had to sell, like they sold everything and they got deported. So they came back to literally nothing. Yeah. They didn't have a house anymore. They didn't have any furniture. They had nothing. And so then of course they're going to try and leave again because now there's even less for them here.
Yeah, it's a worse situation.
Right. Or another situation where a family was struggling with the gangs, so they decided to leave. But again, they got sent back. So coming back to where it's like, okay, well maybe, you know, do you make that decision to stay? Or another family who it was the mom and a stepdad, and they were doing well for themselves, but the government changed. He had been working in government. So they're like, oh, okay, maybe we should go somewhere else to get a job. Well, they couldn't take the kids with them, which means the kids moved in with drunk dad who doesn't know how to provide for them.
Yeah.
So again, it's like, okay, well, we're going to be sending money, but what situation are they left in?
Yeah. I was to say that money just to provide for bad habits,
right?
You know, like
right. And we have a couple boys whose mom left years ago to go to Spain to work to send money back, and she cared. Like just reading through their information sheets, she was a mom that cared a lot.
Yeah.
And she left so that she could provide for them, and then through awful circumstances, you know, she ended up coming back with mental issues and ended up committing suicide. But the boys say they're like, we don't remember our mom.
Yeah.
And so they're like, she was, like one of the boys specifically said, she was always absent except financially. Even when she was around, she was working all the time. And so it's like from a parent's perspective, it's like, well, I have to work. I have to provide for them.
Yeah.
But what do your kids see?
Yeah.
They don't know what a family is.
And the different fallout from the separation and there's just so many different mental health issues that come into play, and then cycles that, like you said already, that have a tendency to be repeated. That's got to be tough, because then, as you know, it's beautiful because you guys try to serve those people, among others, and you can speak truth into their life, but you see the damage it does on a regular basis. And all we have to do is look at our country to see the damage that happens when the family unit is not guarded.
Right.
You know, and it's broken up so often. And, you know, it's devastating. It's for a very different reason though for you guys. Like I'm trying to just picture, you know, we have where parents separate and one might move or something, but it's nowhere near like I'm leaving. Maybe I'll send some money, but there's a good chance you're never going to see or hear from me again.
Yeah.
You know, and what that.
And what's challenging is sometimes the situations they're going to aren't as good as they think they're going to be.
No.
You know, they think, oh, I'll go and make all this money. Well, they get there and they're barely scraping by. Yeah. So then they can't send money back.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes they are able to, and sometimes that helps, but
like you said, to what end? The parent's not there.
Right.
You know, like the two boys that the mother so sadly, you know, ended up ending her life because of mental issues. Like, even they were saying that's great that there were times where money was there, but she was never present. And so I guess, as that's part of the issue and a major thing, how can we pray? So people that are listening, what would you say, maybe one of your personal prayer requests that you have, one of your needs moving forward, but also how do we pray for that?
I think one thing that it was actually my pastor's wife in Honduras had mentioned when we were talking about some different things is the darkness is so dark around us that sometimes it's so easy to feel discouraged and hopeless. Yeah. And she just said, but we need to remember that we know how the story ends.
Yeah.
God has defeated all of this. We know that Satan will not win. Yeah. But it's so hard in those moments to just feel overcome. Like, what are my prayers going to do? How could God redeem this situation?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's something that I'm constantly trying to remind myself is that Satan does not win.
Yeah.
This darkness does not win. Even though I don't understand why these kids are in this situation or why it feels like we could never overcome, that we're fighting a losing battle. It's not a losing battle. Absolutely. Because God already won.
Yeah.
And so I think just not losing heart and praying. And I think that that's something that I'm constantly reminding myself in all situations, like even like the situation in Ukraine and Russia. I feel like that's been on my prayer list since it started, obviously. And so I'm like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm writing this in my prayer journal every day. Like, is it worth it? Yes, it's worth it, because we need to keep moving forward and keep praying that God will redeem those situations, because we know that he will.
Yes.
And so, I think just not losing heart and continuing to pray, even if it's the same situation over and over. And just praying that, I think for the ministry and for our kids, that even as their family situation is unstable, that they will find stability in the ministry. And I shared a video in Sunday school on Sunday that I had put together, and it's actually one of the boys whose mom committed suicide. And he says, the special thing about Nueva Esperanza is that Jesus is the center, and that everybody that works there reflects Jesus, and that at the ministry, it's not uncommon for our kids not to have parents, not to have siblings, whatever the situation is, but at the ministry, they have that. They have siblings, siblings in Christ, just from the times that they've grown up together, they have siblings, they have aunts and uncles. He went on to list all these different attributes of, family members and things like that. And so just that the ministry would continue to be a place of stability for them, that they can recognize that the Lord is in the ministry, and that he goes home with them as well. And so just that peace and that understanding would follow them.
Be part of their life and realize, because so often we forget that God is the same everywhere. You might experience him or be aware of him differently in different places, but especially as youth and young kids, like the God that you experience here at Nueva is the same God at home. Even though there's turmoil and the circumstances are very different, God is the same. And so definitely praying for the kids to realize that, and the reminder, like you said, that God wins. And for you to have that at the forefront in the midst of the darkness, so that the discouragement doesn't settle in and overtake. So what I was trying to look up and not quite finding, your email address. Let people know what your email address is, the best way to get in touch with you, or best way to maybe get on your newsletter or to partner with you. Is it Morgan Ring 99?
Morgan.ring.99.
That's what, okay. I was just saying, I remembered most of it, but okay. So all lowercase, morgan.ring.99@gmail.com.
Yeah. And that's my personal email. I also have a work one that some people might get emails from every once in a while. Yeah. And I check them both regularly.
Okay. So if someone wants to know more about Nueva, if someone wants to know more about partnering with you or getting your newsletter so that they can pray regularly for you, that would be the best way to get in touch with you.
Yep.
And if you forget that, or if that doesn't work out, you can always get in touch with the church, and we can make sure that you get all the contact information that you need to come alongside and partner. I'm excited. It's always missions again is something that's at the core of the Federated Church.
Mm-hmm.
It's at the core of your family. You remember, you were old enough that you have memories of when you guys were in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
you were how old?
6. I turned 7 while we were
Okay,
there.
so you turned 7 while you were there.
Pictures help the memories.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Wait till you get older. Whew, then the question is, do you actually remember, or is it only because you have a picture? I'm like, I don't know which one, but now that I see the picture, I remember. But like that, you saw that displayed, from your grandparents, your parents, your actual life. And so it's something that you're walking in now. And so it's always great to see that and where God's leading. So thank you very much for having the time to take and have a little bit more of a spotlight on your ministry and what God's doing for you. If those of you that joined us today, I want to encourage you to be reminded to be praying for Morgan, for Nueva Esperanza, and for the ministry that's happening there, and the people of Honduras, and especially the families, as we talked about at the end, and have that be, we talked about grocery lists, but put that on your prayer list, so that you can be praying on a regular basis. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on Federated Squared Circle, Wrestling with God's Word. We'll see you next week.